Have you ever worked toward something for months, maybe even years, only to watch it fall apart in what feels like an instant? Maybe it was a job you poured your heart into that suddenly ended, a relationship that didn't work out despite your best efforts, or a dream project that never got off the ground. In moments like these, it's not just the outcome that hurts, it's what that failure seems to say about you. It can feel like your very identity has been called into question, as if your worth is tied directly to things that are ultimately outside your control. That feeling of fragility, that uncertainty about who you are when the things you relied on disappear, is one of the most disorienting experiences we go through as human beings. But what if you could build an identity so strong, so resilient, that even when everything around you seems to fail, you remain unshaken? That's exactly what the ancient Stoics dedicated their lives to understanding. 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Epictetus offered a simple but life-changing idea. Some things are up to us, and some are not. He recognized that we suffer most when we tie our sense of self to things we can't fully control: external validations like success, reputation, or other people's opinions. The Stoics believed that true resilience doesn't come from avoiding failure, but from rebuilding how we see ourselves in the first place. They developed a powerful framework for constructing an identity that isn't threatened by setbacks, one rooted not in what happens to us, but in how we choose to respond. This isn't about suppressing emotion or pretending failure doesn't hurt. It's about shifting the foundation of who we are to something sturdier, something that can't be taken away. In this video, we're going to explore exactly how you can apply these ancient principles to build an identity that survives failure. We'll look at key Stoic practices like cognitive reframing, which teaches us to question our initial judgments about what's truly good or bad. We'll discuss basing your self-worth on virtue qualities like courage, wisdom, and integrity, rather than on outcomes that can change in an instant. And we'll learn how to cultivate acceptance of the things we cannot change, freeing ourselves from the constant anxiety of trying to control the uncontrollable. By the end, you'll have practical tools to reconstruct your thinking, strengthen your inner foundation, and face life's inevitable challenges with a renewed sense of stability and purpose. This isn't just philosophy, it's a way of reclaiming your narrative and building a self that endures no matter what comes your way. This idea, known as the Dichotomy of Control, is the absolute bedrock of Stoic philosophy and the first step toward building an unshakable identity. Epictetus, who was born a slave and faced immense adversity, argued that the root of our emotional suffering isn't the events themselves, but our misplaced investment in things we ultimately have no command over. He divided all of existence into two very distinct categories. The first category includes everything that is truly up to us. This is our inner world, our judgments, our values, our intentions, our efforts, and our character. The choices we make about how to respond to any given situation. The second category encompasses everything that is not up to us. This is the vast external world of outcomes. Whether we get the job, whether someone likes us, our reputation, our wealth, our health, and even our past mistakes. The crucial insight here is that we can pour our absolute best effort into something and still not control the result. You can prepare perfectly for a job interview, but you can't control if another candidate had more experience. You can be a kind and loyal partner, but you can't control another person's feelings. You can build a business with integrity, but you can't control a sudden shift in the market. When we build our identity on those external things, when we say, "I am successful because of my job title," or I am worthy because people admire me. We are constructing our sense of self on a foundation of sand. It might feel solid for a while, but the first strong wave of failure, rejection, or criticism can wash it all away, leaving us feeling lost and questioning our entire worth. This is the fragility that Epictetus warns us about. The alternative, the path to resilience, is to consciously shift the foundation of your identity inward, to anchor it firmly in what is always unequivocally up to you. Your identity becomes not "I am a vice president," but "I am a person who acts with diligence and integrity." It's not "I am popular," but "I am a person who treats others with respect and compassion." Your self-worth is then derived from your character and your actions, which can never be taken from you. A job loss then becomes a challenging event, but it doesn't negate your diligence. A rejection becomes a disappointing outcome, but it doesn't erase your courage for having tried. Think about a modern example, being laid off from a job you loved. The initial shock is profound because that role was likely a huge part of how you defined yourself, in your own mind, and in how you presented yourself to the world. The external validation of a salary and a title suddenly vanishes. The Stoic approach isn't to pretend it doesn't hurt, but to consciously decouple the event from your core identity. You can acknowledge the difficulty while reaffirming, "My value is not in that title. My value is in my skills, my work ethic, my ability to learn, and how I treat people. Those things are still with me. I chose to work with integrity every day, and that choice was up to me. The company's decision to restructure was not." This mental shift doesn't solve the practical problem of needing a new job, but it solves the existential crisis. It protects you from the tailspin of despair that makes it so hard to move forward. So, as you consider your own life, what parts of your self-worth are currently dependent on things outside your control? So if our identity shouldn't be anchored in the shifting sands of external outcomes, where should we plant our flag? The Stoics offered a powerful and timeless answer: virtue. They believed that your true self isn't defined by what you have or what you've accomplished, but by the content of your character. Imagine your identity as a tree. Achievements, social status, and possessions are like the leaves and fruit. They come and go with the seasons. They can be blown away by a strong wind or picked by someone else. But virtue, embodied in the four cardinal Stoic qualities of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, is the deep root system. It's hidden from view, but it's what allows the tree to stand firm through every storm, season after season. This is the profound shift the Stoics invite us to make. Stop identifying yourself by your harvest and start identifying yourself by your roots. Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, constantly reminded himself of this in his private journal, known today as Meditations. He wrote, "You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow." For him, acting according to nature meant living in accordance with virtue, right now, in the present moment, regardless of the situation. His nature as a rational human being was to exercise wisdom in his decisions, courage in the face of fear, justice in his dealings with others, and temperance in his desires. His identity wasn't Marcus the Emperor, it was Marcus, a man striving for virtue. This meant that even on the battlefield or when facing political betrayal, his core mission remained the same: to choose the virtuous action. His job title was an external, his character was an internal. One could be taken away, the other could not. This philosophy turns our modern conception of failure completely on its head. In a world obsessed with results, we see a failed business venture or a rejected proposal as a stain on our record, proof that we are not enough. But through the Stoic lens, failure doesn't diminish your virtue. In fact, it often provides the perfect arena to reveal it and make it stronger. Think about the historical figure Cato the Younger. He was a Roman senator who staunchly opposed the rise of Julius Caesar and the end of the Republic. From a purely outcome-based perspective, Cato was a spectacular failure. His side lost the civil war, his cause was crushed, and he ultimately took his own life to avoid being pardoned by a tyrant. Yet, in the centuries that followed, Cato was celebrated by Stoics and many others as a towering example of integrity. Why? Because his identity was so firmly rooted in his virtues, his unwavering courage and his commitment to justice, that even total political defeat could not shake it. His failure in the external world only served to highlight his success in the internal one. He remained true to his principles until the very end, and that, to the Stoics, is the ultimate measure of a life well lived. Your own challenges, while likely less dramatic, operate on the same principle. That project that didn't get funded, it can't touch your wisdom if you learned from the experience. That difficult conversation that didn't go the way you hoped, it can't erase the courage it took to have it. That time you walked away from a toxic situation. That was an act of justice toward yourself. When you begin to see your life through this framework, setbacks transform from verdicts on your worth into mere data points. They become feedback on your methods, not on your character. They show you where the world is resistant, but they don't say anything about the strength of your roots. This is how you build an identity that survives any failure. You make your primary goal not a specific outcome, but the quality of your effort and the integrity of your actions along the way. So take a moment to look inward. Beyond your job, your social circle, or your possessions, what are your core values? What virtues do you want to define you, regardless of what happens in your external world? But what happens in that crucial moment between an event and our emotional reaction to it? The Stoics identified a powerful gap there, a space where our freedom truly resides, and they developed a practice to widen it called cognitive distancing. It's the act of mentally stepping back from your initial, raw impressions to observe them rather than being swept away by them. Think of it as pressing a pause button on your own mind. When something goes wrong, our first instinct is often to immediately label it. This is terrible. This is a disaster. This ruins everything. Cognitive distancing asks us to challenge that automatic labeling. It's recognizing that the event itself is neutral until we assign a value judgment to it. The event is just an event. It's our interpretation that gives it the power to hurt us. This is the profound truth behind one of Epictetus's most famous quotes. Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. A job rejection is in its purest form simply an email or a phone call conveying a decision. The disturbance, the crushing disappointment, the feeling of inadequacy, the anxiety about the future is not in the message itself. It is generated by the story we instantly tell ourselves about that message. I'm not good enough. I'll never find a job. Everyone will be disappointed in me. We conflate the event with our judgment of the event, and in doing so, we hand over all of our power to something external. Cognitive distancing is the tool that allows us to take that power back. It's the mental process of separating the objective fact from the subjective narrative. Let's make this practical with a simple exercise you can try the very next time something goes off plan. When you feel that familiar surge of frustration or disappointment, maybe you're stuck in traffic, you receive some critical feedback, or a plan you were excited about gets cancelled, pause for just 5 seconds. In that pause, consciously ask yourself one question. Is this event truly harmful to my character, or is it merely inconvenient to my preferences? This single question forces you to apply the dichotomy of control and engage your rational mind instead of letting your emotional reflexes run the show. Being stuck in traffic is inconvenient. It delays your plans and annoys you. But is it truly harmful? Does it damage your virtue? Does it prevent you from being courageous, wise, or just? Almost always the answer is no. Critical feedback might sting your ego, but is it harmful? Or is it potentially useful information that you can choose to learn from? By consistently making this distinction between a genuine threat to your core self and a mere frustration to your desires, you begin to drain these events of their exaggerated power. You train yourself to see that most of what we dramatically call failure is actually just life not conforming to our preferences in a given moment. And that is something your resilient, virtue-based identity can handle with grace. Now, let's explore a Stoic practice that might sound counterintuitive at first, but is incredibly effective for building mental fortitude: Premeditatio Malorum, which translates to the premeditation of evils. This isn't about dwelling on doom and gloom or becoming a pessimist. It's a proactive exercise in emotional inoculation. The Stoics understood that we suffer more in our imagination than in reality. We build up potential failures in our minds, attaching enormous weight and fear to them, and then when they actually happen, if they happen at all, the experience is often far less catastrophic than we had envisioned. Premeditatio Malorum is the deliberate act of pulling those fears out of the shadows and examining them calmly in the light of day, so they lose their power to shock and destabilize us. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher and statesman, was a powerful advocate for this technique. He advised, we should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. His point was that by foreseeing potential adversities, we can soften their blow. It's the difference between being blindsided by a punch you never saw coming and bracing yourself for an impact you are prepared to receive. The punch might still land, but you're not knocked out by it. You're able to keep your footing, your wits about you, and respond from a place of composure rather than pure panic. This practice systematically desensitizes you to life's uncertainties, building a callus of resilience on the mind. So how does this work in a practical, modern sense? Imagine you have a major presentation coming up at work, one that could lead to a promotion or significant recognition. The usual approach might be to visualize everything going perfectly: the applause, the approval from your boss, the successful outcome. But what happens if your laptop crashes right as you begin, or a key stakeholder challenges your data aggressively, or you simply blank on your main point? If your entire emotional and mental investment is in the perfect outcome, any of these hiccups can feel like a total personal failure. It can shake your confidence not just for that moment, but for the entire day, because it violated the only reality you had prepared for. Now apply Premeditatio Malorum. The day before the presentation, you sit down for 10 minutes and you consciously walk through these potential setbacks. You visualize the laptop crashing, you feel the initial jolt of panic, and then you see yourself calmly asking for a moment to reboot, or smoothly transitioning to a backup plan like printed notes or a whiteboard. You imagine someone interrupting with a tough question, and you picture yourself taking a breath, acknowledging the question, and responding with, "That's an excellent point, let me address that." By mentally rehearsing these scenarios, you accomplish two crucial things. First, you reduce the fear of the unknown. These events are no longer terrifying monsters. They are just possibilities for which you have a plan. Second, and most importantly for your identity, you reinforce that your worth is not in the flawless execution of the presentation, but in your character and your response to the circumstances. A technical glitch doesn't make you incompetent. How you handle the glitch demonstrates your competence. A challenging question doesn't expose you as a fraud. How you engage with it shows your depth of knowledge and poise. This is the core of how Premeditatio Malorum helps you detach your identity from specific outcomes. When you have already accepted that things could go wrong and have visualized yourself navigating those challenges with virtue, with wisdom, courage, and calm, you break the link between the external result and your internal sense of self. The presentation is an external. Your preparation and your composure under pressure are internals. By practicing for adversity, you make your commitment to those internals unshakable. You go into the situation having already succeeded in the most important way, by being prepared to remain yourself no matter what happens. Now, let's take this idea of prepared acceptance one step further, into a profound and transformative mindset the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche called amor fati, a love of one's fate. This powerful concept, though coined by Nietzsche, is deeply Stoic in its spirit. It's the radical practice of not just accepting everything that happens to you, including your failures and setbacks, but actively embracing it, loving it, and seeing it as an essential and necessary part of your unique path. It's the decision to look at the entire tapestry of your life, the bright threads of success and the dark threads of hardship, and say, I would not have it any other way, for this is what has made me who I am. While Nietzsche gave it its most famous name, the seed of this idea is clearly present in the writings of Marcus Aurelius over 1600 years earlier. The emperor constantly counseled himself to accept the unfolding of nature's plan without resistance. He wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." His view was that an obstacle, a piece of misfortune, is like fuel. It doesn't extinguish the fire of your character, it feeds it, making it burn brighter and stronger. To love your fate is to understand that the universe is not a chaotic, hostile place, but a kind of cosmic gymnasium. Every event, especially the difficult ones, is a piece of equipment designed to train a specific muscle of your virtue. A failure in business trains your resilience and humility. A personal betrayal trains your discernment and your capacity to forgive. A period of loss trains your gratitude for what remains. Nothing is wasted. Everything is repurposed as fuel for your growth. This is how we can learn to reframe our failures not as verdicts on our past, but as invitations for our future. The question shifts from "Why did this happen to me?" which leads to helplessness, to "What is this preparing me for?" which leads to empowerment. That project that collapsed didn't just fail. It taught you invaluable lessons about planning, teamwork, or market fit that will make your next venture stronger. That relationship that ended painfully didn't just bring heartache. It clarified what you truly value in a partner and revealed areas where you yourself can grow. When you begin to search for the value embedded within the difficulty, you stop being a victim of circumstance and become a student of experience. You are no longer defined by what happened to you, but by what you chose to do with what happened. So think about your most recent setback, no matter how large or small. It could be a missed opportunity, a mistake you made at work, or even just a day where nothing seemed to go right. Instead of brushing it aside or trying to forget it, pause for a moment and ask yourself with genuine curiosity, can I find the value hidden here? What lesson is disguised within this frustration? How might this exact situation, which feels like a stumbling block, actually be a stepping stone? The act of asking this question is itself a practice of amor fati. It is the first step toward not just tolerating your fate, but loving it, and in doing so, loving the strong, resilient, and deeply capable person it is helping you to become. This practice of mentally zooming out is one of the most powerful tools the Stoics left us, and they called it the view from above. It's a deliberate exercise in shifting your perspective from the myopic, close-up view of your immediate problems to a vast, panoramic outlook that encompasses the whole of space and time. When you're locked in the moment, a single setback can feel all-consuming, like the entire world is crashing down. But the Stoics asked us to engage our reason and actively picture our lives from this cosmic vantage point. From there, our biggest troubles begin to look remarkably small, not to diminish their importance to us, but to place them within a more truthful and calming context. Marcus Aurelius was a master of this. As the most powerful man in the known world, he faced immense pressures: wars, plagues, political betrayals, the burden of governing an empire. And yet, in his private writings, he constantly reminded himself of the brevity of life and the smallness of his worries in the grand scheme. He would write lines like, "Think of the whole of existence, of which you are the tiniest fragment, and keep in mind how all things are soon swallowed up by history." He wasn't being dismissive or cynical. He was engaging in a profound psychological technique to prevent any single event, no matter how dramatic, from destabilizing his inner peace. By contemplating the unimaginable vastness of the universe and the endless march of time, he made his own anxieties seem less monstrous and more manageable. His problems didn't disappear, but their power to terrorize him was drastically reduced. You can apply this same perspective to a modern challenge. Consider a significant career setback. Perhaps you were passed over for a promotion you worked incredibly hard for. In the immediate aftermath, it's easy for this event to dominate your entire mental landscape. It can feel like a definitive judgment on your skills, your value, and your future prospects. The disappointment is real and valid, but now try to take the view from above. Zoom out from this moment. Picture yourself 1 year from now. Will this specific promotion still feel like the crushing blow it does today? Or will other opportunities, other experiences have likely emerged? Now zoom out further. Picture yourself at the end of your career, looking back on this entire professional journey. From that vantage point, how significant will this one missed promotion appear amidst decades of work, growth, relationships, and other achievements? It will likely be a single dot on a very long line, a minor plot point in a much larger story. Now zoom out even more to a cosmic scale. Our planet is a tiny, pale blue dot orbiting an average star in a galaxy of hundreds of billions of stars, which is itself one of perhaps 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. From that perspective, the conference room where the promotion decision was made is smaller than a grain of sand on an endless beach. This exercise isn't meant to make your ambitions feel pointless. It's designed to liberate you. It separates the objective fact of the event from the overwhelming subjective narrative you've attached to it. The event remains, but the catastrophic meaning you assign to it starts to evaporate. So bring this down to your life right now. What is the current worry that feels heavy on your shoulders? A financial pressure, a conflict in a relationship, a project that isn't going to plan? Take a quiet minute and try this. Close your eyes and visualize yourself 5 years into the future, looking back on this present moment. From that future self's point of view, how does this current challenge appear? What advice would that wiser, more experienced version of you offer about it? You'll often find that the sharp edges of present anxiety are smoothed out by the river of time. This shift doesn't solve the practical problem, but it solves the emotional crisis surrounding it. It returns to you the clarity and calm needed to address the issue effectively without the weight of the world on your chest. It reaffirms that while this moment is part of your story, it is not the whole story. This profound shift in perspective brings us to one of the most liberating Stoic practices, focusing exclusively on the process, not the outcome. While the view from above helps us see our problems in their proper scale, this principle gives us a way to navigate them day by day, moment by moment. The Stoics argued that our peace of mind and our true worth are found not in the trophies we accumulate, but in the quality of our effort, in the integrity of the work itself. Epictetus, who constantly drove this point home, put it with characteristic bluntness: where is the good in the will? Where is the evil in the will? Where is neither in those things that are not up to us? His instruction was to do your best with what is within your control, your preparation, your intention, your ethical choices, and then to accept with a calm heart whatever result follows. The outcome is simply not your department. It belongs to the realm of external events, which are fickle and ultimately indifferent to your well-being. This philosophy completely rewires our modern definition of success and, by extension, our identity. We live in a results-obsessed culture that constantly whispers a dangerous lie that you are what you achieve. This creates a fragile identity, a house of cards built on a foundation of promotions, wins, likes, and accolades. The slightest breeze of failure can topple it. The Stoic approach offers a sturdier foundation. It invites you to shift your core identity from "I am a success" or "I am a failure," both of which are judgments on fleeting outcomes, to a far more stable and empowering statement: "I am someone who acts with integrity, gives my best effort, and focuses on what I can control." This identity cannot be taken from you. A lost game doesn't make you a person who lacked discipline in training. A rejected manuscript doesn't make you a person who didn't pour their heart into the writing. You get to keep the most important part, the character you built and demonstrated in the attempt. We can see this principle in action everywhere, especially in fields where outcomes are notoriously uncertain. Consider a professional athlete. They can train with perfect discipline, follow their nutrition plan to the letter, and execute their game plan flawlessly. But they cannot control the weather, a referee's bad call, an opponent's once-in-a-lifetime performance, or a sudden gust of wind that pushes a ball a few inches off course. If their entire sense of self is tied to winning the championship, they are setting themselves up for existential agony. The athlete who embraces a Stoic mindset, however, defines their success by their process. Their victory is in the pre-dawn training sessions, the focused film study, the resilience shown after a missed shot. The final score is information, sometimes welcome, sometimes disappointing, but it is not the verdict on their worth. The same is true for any creative endeavor. A writer cannot control whether a publisher loves their book, but they can control showing up at the desk every day, honing their craft and writing with honesty. Their success is in the act of creation itself. Any publication or acclaim is a bonus, not the source of their value. This focus on process is the ultimate practical application of the dichotomy of control. It takes the vast, intimidating question of "Will I succeed?" and breaks it down into a series of small, manageable, internal questions you can actually answer. Did I prepare thoroughly? Did I act with courage? Did I treat others fairly? Was my intention pure? By concentrating your energy on answering yes to these questions every day, you build a life of virtue regardless of external recognition. You become the kind of person for whom success is an internal state, not an external reward. This doesn't mean you stop caring about goals. On the contrary, it allows you to pursue them with more freedom and less anxiety, because your self-esteem is no longer held hostage by them. You can play the game of life with more creativity, more resilience, and more joy, because you've already won the only game that truly matters, the one happening inside your own mind. So where in your own life can you begin to pull your attention away from the noisy, unpredictable outcomes and redirect it to the quiet, dependable quality of your own actions? Yet we live in a world that is constantly trying to stick labels on us, defining our entire worth by the roles we play and the titles we hold. Society tells us that we are our job title, our relationship status, our income bracket, or our social media following. These are the modern-day equivalents of the Roman toga or the senator's ring, external markers that we are taught to confuse with our internal worth. Stoicism offers a powerful and liberating corrective to this by encouraging us to see all of these labels for what they truly are: preferred indifference. This doesn't mean they are worthless or that we shouldn't prefer to have them. It means that they have no inherent power to make us good or bad people. They are neither necessary nor sufficient for a virtuous life. Their presence or absence does not determine our moral character, which is the only true source of a stable identity. The Stoic philosopher Seneca explored this idea with incredible depth in his letters, often writing about the profound fragility of the things we typically chase. In one famous passage, he warns that wealth is a fickle master, writing that riches have shut off many a man from the attainment of wisdom. He saw how the relentless pursuit of external status could actually pull us away from our true selves, making us slaves to public opinion and vulnerable to every shift of fortune. He compared reputation to a delicate piece of glass. It shines brightly, but it can be shattered by the slightest touch. The person who builds their identity on being the wealthy one or the respected executive is building their home on the slopes of a volcano. It might be a beautiful view for a while, but it is only a matter of time before the ground gives way. Seneca's point was not that we should live in poverty or seek obscurity, but that we must hold these externals lightly, like a tool we can use rather than a treasure we must protect. We must be able to say, "This is something I have," not "This is something I am." This philosophical groundwork allows us to navigate one of life's most common identity crises, the loss of a major role. Consider someone who has dedicated 40 years to a career and then retires. For decades, their answer to the question, "What do you do?" was the cornerstone of their social identity. Without that title, that daily structure, and that source of validation, it's incredibly common to feel adrift, to feel as if a core part of the self has simply vanished. The Stoic response is to gently but firmly challenge that feeling. That job was something you did. It is not who you are. The skills you used, your diligence, your creativity, your ability to collaborate, those are parts of your character that you still possess. The respect you earned from colleagues was a response to your virtue, not your position. The title was merely the costume you wore while exercising your character on the stage of your career. The stage has now changed, but the actor, the essential you, defined by your virtues, remains entirely intact. The same is true for the parent whose children leave home, the athlete who can no longer compete, or the artist who hasn't sold a piece in years. The role may change or end, but the person playing it, if their identity is rooted in virtue, remains unshaken. This invites a moment of powerful and personal reflection. We all carry these labels with us, often without realizing how tightly we're clinging to them. What are the stories you tell yourself about who you are that are entirely dependent on things outside your control? Do you believe you are only worthwhile if you are in a relationship? Do you feel you are only successful if you have a certain title on your business card? Do you see yourself as intelligent only if you have a specific degree? These are the invisible chains that Stoicism asks us to identify and break. The practice is to consciously separate your core self from these external attachments. When you introduce yourself, try it mentally first. Not "I am a manager," but "I am a person who enjoys building teams and solving problems." Not "I am a mother," but "I am a person who expresses love through nurture and guidance." This subtle linguistic shift is a profound act of philosophical rebellion. It reclaims your identity from the world of things that can be taken away and anchors it firmly in the world of character, which is yours forever. So ask yourself with honest curiosity, What labels have I been clinging to that aren't actually essential to who I am at my core? This brings us to a fundamental Stoic belief that completely redefines our relationship with hardship, the idea that adversity is not an interruption of a good life, but an essential part of its curriculum. The Stoics didn't just advise us to endure difficulty, they invited us to see it as the very training ground where our character is forged and our resilience is built. They viewed challenges not as punishments to be avoided, but as opportunities to practice the virtues they preached. It's the difference between seeing a heavy weight as a burden and seeing it as exercise equipment for your soul. This mindset transforms every setback from a threat into a test, and every failure from a verdict into a lesson. Marcus Aurelius, who faced near constant warfare, plague, and betrayal during his reign, penned one of the most empowering reframes ever written on this subject. He said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is more than simple optimism. It's a profound philosophical stance. He is arguing that the obstacle itself is not a barrier to your path, it is the path. The very thing that seems to block your progress is in fact the raw material for your growth. A financial setback becomes the way to practice frugality and resourcefulness. A personal conflict becomes the way to practice patience and understanding. A professional failure becomes the way to practice humility and perseverance. The obstacle doesn't just teach you how to overcome it, it actively builds the muscle you need for the next challenge. By shifting your perspective in this way, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this preparing me for?" We can find a powerful historical example of this principle in the life of Seneca the Younger. Seneca was a renowned philosopher and a trusted advisor to the Roman Emperor Nero. He had reached the pinnacle of power, wealth, and influence. Then, suddenly, he was accused of conspiracy, a charge most historians believe was false, and was ordered by the emperor to take his own life. This was the ultimate adversity, an unjust death sentence, but for Seneca, this final act became his ultimate demonstration of Stoic principle. He did not rage against the injustice or beg for mercy. He met his end with calm acceptance and reason, comforting his grieving friends and family. His biographers recorded that his final words were a request to write down his will, and when the soldiers refused, he turned to his friends and said, "Then I leave you what is of most value, the pattern of my life." In his greatest moment of loss, Seneca focused on what he could still control: his character, his dignity, and the example he set for others. His adversity did not break him. It became the final, definitive proof of the philosophy he had lived by. You don't need to face a death sentence to apply this same reframing to your own life. Think back to a past difficulty you've experienced. It might have been a period of unemployment, the end of a significant relationship, a health scare, or a project that fell apart. In the moment, it likely felt purely negative, a chapter you'd rather forget. But what if you were to look at that same event through the Stoic lens of training? Can you identify the specific muscles that challenge forced you to develop? Perhaps that period of professional uncertainty taught you resilience and pushed you to develop new skills you otherwise wouldn't have pursued. Maybe that heartbreak taught you profound lessons about your own needs and boundaries, strengthening your future relationships. That project failure might have revealed a critical flaw in your approach that made all your subsequent work stronger. The event itself remains the same, but its meaning shifts from a wound to a workout. It becomes a necessary and valuable part of your development, a difficult but crucial session in the gym of life that left you stronger than you were before. By consciously reframing our past in this way, we don't just make peace with it, we actively integrate it into the story of our strength, building an identity that is not in spite of adversity, but is actually fortified because of it. This brings us to one of the most empowering concepts in Stoic philosophy, the idea of an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind built on reason and virtue that remains unassailable no matter what chaos unfolds in the external world. Imagine your consciousness as a fortified castle. Outside the walls, the weather rages, armies of misfortune, criticism, and failure may lay siege. But within the stronghold, there is calm, clarity, and an unwavering sense of self. The storms cannot breach the walls unless you, the gatekeeper, willingly open the doors and invite them in. This inner citadel isn't a place of escape from reality, but a place of retreat for perspective, a sanctuary where you can access your core values and respond to events from a place of principle rather than panic. It is the ultimate embodiment of the Stoic truth that while we cannot control what happens to us, we always retain sovereign control over how we choose to interpret and respond to it. Marcus Aurelius provided perhaps the most vivid description of this practice in his Meditations. He wrote, "People look for retreats for themselves in the country, by the coast, or in the hills, but this is altogether unphilosophical when you can at any moment retreat into yourself. Nowhere can a person find a more peaceful and untroubled retreat than in his own soul, so constantly give yourself this retreat and renew yourself." He is telling us that the most reliable refuge is not a physical location, a quiet room, or a peaceful beach, but a state of mind that you can access instantly, anywhere. It is the mental act of withdrawing from the dizzying noise of external judgments and returning to the quiet, rational court of your own mind. In the midst of a stressful meeting, a personal conflict, or a public failure, you can, in a split second, retreat behind the walls of your citadel. From that place of inner safety, you can observe the situation without being consumed by it. The insult loses its sting because you see it not as a truth about you, but as a reflection of the other person's state of mind. The setback loses its power to define you because you remember that your worth is determined by your character, not your circumstances. Cultivating this unshakable inner fortress isn't a passive process. It is an active construction project that happens through daily practice. It is built brick by brick through small, consistent habits that reinforce your connection to your rational self. One of the most powerful bricks is the daily practice of morning preparation. Before the day begins, take just a few minutes to sit in silence and mentally rehearse the challenges you might face. Remind yourself of the Stoic principles, that people may act unfairly, that plans may go awry, but that your only task is to meet each event with virtue. This isn't pessimism, it is psychological inoculation. Another crucial brick is the evening review, where you reflect on your actions without harsh judgment. Did you live in accordance with your values today? Where did you let an external event disturb your inner peace? This isn't about self-criticism, but about gentle course correction, strengthening the walls for tomorrow. Consider a practical example: maintaining your calm in the face of harsh criticism. Without an inner citadel, a critical comment, especially an unfair one, can feel like a direct assault. It triggers a flood of defensive anger, shame, or anxiety. You might lash out or internalize the negativity, allowing it to ruin your day and shake your confidence. But when you have been actively building your mental fortress, your reaction is entirely different. You feel the initial sting, that is human, but then you consciously retreat inward. You pause, you ask yourself the Stoic questions. Is this criticism within my control? No, the other person's opinion is their own. Is there any truth here I can use to improve? If so, I can accept that feedback with gratitude, separating the useful signal from the noisy delivery. If not, I can dismiss it as irrelevant to my character, understanding that it says more about the critic than it does about me. By doing this, you protect your peace of mind. You choose not to let the external event vandalize your inner sanctum. The criticism happened, but it did not damage you. Your core self, safe within its walls, remains intact and undisturbed. So what daily practices can you begin to implement right now to strengthen the foundations of your own inner citadel and safeguard your peace of mind? One of the most practical and transformative habits the Stoics left us is the simple yet profound practice of nightly journaling. In the quiet space between the day's events and sleep, they engaged in a deliberate ritual of self-reflection, a conscious audit of their own character. Seneca, in his letters, championed this habit with compelling clarity. He described his own evening practice, writing, "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, aware of this habit that's now mine, I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said. I hide nothing from myself, I pass nothing by. This wasn't an exercise in self-criticism or guilt. It was an act of rigorous, honest self-accountability." He was holding his actions up against the unwavering standard of his own virtues, not the fluctuating standards of the world. For the Stoics, this nightly review was the essential tool for ensuring that their identity remained firmly rooted in what was truly theirs to control, their choices and their character, rather than becoming tangled in the external outcomes of the day. This practice is incredibly powerful because it actively builds the cognitive muscle of separating yourself from your experiences. Throughout any given day, we are bombarded by events that trigger emotional responses. A frustrating interaction, a small victory, a moment of anxiety, a flash of irritation. It's all too easy to subconsciously absorb these events into our identity, to walk away from a difficult meeting feeling like a failure, or to base our entire mood on whether we received a particular piece of news. Journaling creates a sacred space to untangle this mess. By physically writing down the events of the day and your reactions to them, you externalize them. You take them out of the swirling chaos of your mind and place them on the page where you can observe them with objectivity and calm. The event becomes an object of study, not a part of your soul. You are not the frustration, you are the person who experienced frustration and is now choosing how to learn from it. This daily act of separation is like a mental filter, straining out the temporary dust of daily happenings and leaving behind only the permanent gold of your core values. To make this tangible, you don't need a leather-bound journal or hours of free time. The Stoics favored a simple, direct template that cuts straight to the heart of the matter, and you can begin using it tonight. The framework consists of 3 guiding questions. First, ask yourself, what did I do well today in accordance with my virtues? This is not about congratulating yourself for a big win or external praise. It's about identifying the moments you exercised your character. Did you show patience in a situation where you normally would have snapped? Did you act with courage by speaking up about something difficult? Did you demonstrate justice by treating someone fairly when it would have been easier not to? This question actively trains your mind to spot and reinforce virtuous behavior, wiring your brain to seek out opportunities to live your values. The second question is, where did I stray from my values? This requires gentle honesty, not self-flagellation. The goal is to identify the gap between your aspiration and your action with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying data. Perhaps you lost your temper over a minor inconvenience, revealing a need to practice the virtue of temperance. Maybe you avoided a difficult conversation, indicating an area where your courage needs strengthening. Or perhaps you spent time complaining about a circumstance you cannot change, showing a need to better practice the dichotomy of control. By naming these missteps without judgment, you disarm them. You transform a vague feeling of shame into a specific, addressable piece of information. You are not a bad person. You are a person who identified a specific behavior that was not in alignment with who you want to be. The third and final question is the most forward-looking. How can I improve tomorrow? This is where reflection turns into proactive growth. Based on what you learned from the first two questions, you set a simple intention for the following day. If you saw that you were easily distracted, your intention might be to focus on one task at a time for a set period. If you noticed you were quick to judge a colleague, your intention could be to ask them one genuine question to understand their perspective. This question closes the loop, ensuring that your journaling is not a passive record of the past, but an active blueprint for building a more virtuous future. It turns self-awareness into deliberate practice. The entire process takes only a few minutes, but its cumulative effect over weeks and months is nothing short of revolutionary. It forges an identity that is not a passive accumulation of random experiences, but a conscious, daily construction project of character. Why not try it for yourself tonight? All you need is a few quiet moments and a willingness to look inward. It's tempting to look at these Stoic ideals, the unshakable sage, the perfect rational mind, and feel a new kind of pressure. After all, if the goal is to build an identity that never wavers, what does it say about us when we inevitably do? We might read about Marcus Aurelius maintaining his calm in the midst of war, or Seneca facing death with equanimity, and think, I could never do that. I got upset because my coffee was cold this morning. This is where a crucial distinction comes in, one that the Stoics themselves were very careful to make. The sage is not meant to be a realistic target we are expected to hit, but a distant North Star we use to navigate. It is an ideal, a perfect representation of a life lived in complete accordance with nature and reason, and the Stoics were perfectly aware that it was a standard almost no human being could ever fully reach. The point was never to become the sage, but to orient your life in the sage direction. Epictetus, who was famously practical in his teachings, addressed this exact anxiety in his students. He didn't scold them for their imperfections. He encouraged them to focus on the journey itself. He said, if you are ever tempted to look for outside approval, try to make yourself perfect. That way you won't need anyone else's approval. Now read that carefully. He doesn't say become perfect. He says try to make yourself perfect. The value, the transformative power, is in the trying. It is in the constant, daily effort of alignment. He understood that the pursuit of virtue, even when we stumble, is itself the practice that builds a stable and resilient character. Every time you choose to pause before reacting in anger, even if you still end up speaking harshly, you have strengthened the muscle of temperance. Every time you attempt to see a situation from another's perspective, even if you still ultimately disagree, you have exercised the muscle of justice. The attempt itself is the victory. Each effort, no matter how small, is another brick laid in the foundation of your inner citadel. This focus on progress over perfection is what makes Stoicism such a humane and practical philosophy for real life, not just for philosophical debate. It completely redefines what it means to make a mistake. In a perfectionist mindset, a mistake is a stain, a piece of evidence that you are not good enough, that you have failed to live up to the ideal. This triggers shame, which causes us to hide our errors, to avoid challenges where we might fail, and ultimately to stall our growth. But in the Stoic framework of progress, a mistake is simply data. It is invaluable information revealing the gap between your current skill in living and your aspirational target. There is no shame in this gap. It is the universal human condition. The only error is in not paying attention to the lesson it offers. When you spill a drink, the perfectionist feels clumsy and gets frustrated. The progressing Stoic simply notes the spill, cleans it up, and perhaps resolves to be more mindful when carrying a full glass next time. The event is the same. The story told about the event and its impact on identity is entirely different. Think about a real-world application. Imagine you set a goal to respond to criticism with calm curiosity instead of defensive anger. The first time you're tested, you might still snap back with a defensive comment. The old perfectionist script would whisper, "See, you're a fraud, you can't do this. Why even try?" The Stoic approach focused on progress would instead ask, what happened in that moment? What trigger caused the defensive reaction? How did my body feel? What can I learn from this so that next time I might be able to insert a single breath between the criticism and my response? This shifts your identity from "I am a person who fails at Stoicism" to "I am a person who is learning to respond more skillfully, and this misstep was a necessary part of that education." You are not your error, you are the student who is thoughtfully analyzing it. This is how we build an identity that is antifragile, one that actually gets stronger through its stumbles, because each one provides more information and more resolve. So, as you consider your own journey, where can you consciously release the exhausting burden of perfection and instead embrace the empowering and far more realistic path of continuous progress? This constant, relentless flow of time and change is not a flaw in the universe. It is its fundamental nature, and the Stoics argued that our deepest suffering arises when we resist this basic truth. We clutch tightly to moments, to possessions, to relationships, and to versions of ourselves, desperately trying to freeze a single frame in a film that is inherently meant to move forward. Marcus Aurelius, perhaps more than any other Stoic, was consumed by this reality. He returns to it again and again in his meditations, using the powerful metaphor of a rushing river to capture the essence of existence. He writes, "Time is a river, a violent current of events, glimpsed once and already carried past us, and another follows and is gone." His point is that everything, every triumph, every heartbreak, every era of our lives is just water flowing in that river. To try to hold onto any of it is as futile as trying to grasp the river water in your hands. It will inevitably slip through your fingers. The only sane response, the only path to peace, is to accept the flow, to let go of the desperate need for permanence, and to learn to appreciate the beauty of the current moment before it too moves on. When we internalize this perspective of impermanence, something remarkable happens to our sense of identity. It becomes flexible, adaptable, and far more resilient to loss. Think of your identity not as a solid, carved stone statue, but as a living, flowing river itself. A stone statue can be toppled and shattered by a strong enough blow. But a river can encounter a boulder, a fallen tree, or a drought, and it simply adapts its course. It flows around, over, or under the obstacle. It changes shape, but it never ceases to be the river. When you accept that all externals are temporary, your job, your social circle, your physical abilities, even your current passions, you stop building your entire sense of self upon them. You enjoy them while they last, you contribute to them fully, but you hold them with an open hand, not a clenched fist. This doesn't make you cold or detached, it makes you free. It means that when change inevitably comes, it is a change in your circumstances, not a catastrophic collapse of your entire being. We can see the painful consequences of ignoring this truth all around us. Consider the evolution of entire industries. For generations, a person might have built a stable identity and a prosperous life as a typesetter, a blacksmith, or a video store owner. These were not just jobs, they were communities and sources of pride. But technology and consumer habits shifted, and those industries faded. Those who had fused their identity completely with that specific role faced an existential crisis, feeling that their entire world had become obsolete. In contrast, those who understood that their skills, their work ethic, and their adaptability were their true core, who saw the role as temporary but their character as permanent, were able to navigate the change. They learned new skills, they pivoted to related fields, and they reinvented themselves without believing they had lost their fundamental value. The same principle applies to our personal lives. Relationships, even the most profound ones, have a natural lifespan. Some are meant to last a lifetime, while others are beautiful, impactful chapters that eventually come to a close. Clinging to a relationship that has naturally run its course, desperately trying to force it back into a shape it can no longer hold, causes immense suffering for everyone involved. Accepting its impermanence allows you to honor what it was, grieve its passing, and eventually open yourself to new connections, carrying the lessons and love forward rather than the bitterness. This is the profound liberation that Stoic acceptance offers. It allows you to participate fully in life's dance without becoming terrified of the music ever stopping. You can love your partner deeply without the suffocating fear of losing them controlling your every action. You can pour yourself into your work without the panic of potential failure paralyzing you. You can enjoy your health and vitality without denying the reality of aging. By making peace with the temporary nature of all things, you paradoxically become able to enjoy them more deeply and engage with them more courageously, because you are no longer operating from a place of lack and fear. So take a quiet moment to look at your own life. What are you holding onto too tightly right now? What role, what possession, what circumstance, or even what version of yourself are you clinging to with a white-knuckled grip, secretly hoping you can make it permanent against the immutable law of the universe? What would it feel like to gently, bravely, open your hand and let the river flow? This powerful shift in perspective is where we move from simply enduring failure to actively learning from it, transforming what feels like a personal indictment into a neutral source of valuable data. The Stoics were master rationalists, and they approached life setbacks with the same dispassionate curiosity a scientist would apply to a failed experiment. The experiment's outcome doesn't insult the scientist. It simply provides crucial information about what to adjust for the next attempt. Epictetus beautifully captured this mindset when he said, "Every difficulty in life presents us with an opportunity to turn inward and to invoke our own submerged inner resources." The trials we endure can and should introduce us to our strengths. He isn't saying the difficulty is fun or enjoyable. He is saying it is informative. It is a signal that points directly toward an underdeveloped muscle or a blind spot in our approach, and if we can silence the noise of self-judgment, we can hear exactly what it's trying to tell us. The critical first step in this process is to decouple the event from your identity, to make a clear and conscious separation between what happened and who you are. This is the difference between thinking, "I am a failure," and thinking, "I attempted a method that did not produce the desired result." The first statement is a global, permanent judgment on your entire being. It is crushing and absolute. The second statement is a specific, temporary assessment of a single strategy. It is analytical and useful. The Stoic practice here is to treat your own life with the same objective respect a master craftsman shows their tools. If a chisel becomes dull and makes a poor cut, the craftsman doesn't label the chisel a bad chisel and throw it away in a fit of shame. They simply sharpen it. They understand that dullness is a condition, not an identity. Your skills, your methods, your strategies, these are your tools. A failed outcome doesn't mean you are a bad person. It means one of your tools needs sharpening. Let's make this practical with a clear example. Imagine you led a project at work that ultimately did not meet its goals. The initial emotional reaction might be a whirlwind of self-criticism. "I've embarrassed myself. My team must think I'm incompetent. I'm not cut out for this." This is the voice of judgment, and it's completely unproductive. The Stoic approach would be to schedule a Chinese letter, private review of the project, almost as if you were an external consultant brought in to analyze what went wrong. You would ask factual and neutral questions. Was the initial scope too ambitious given the timeline? Did the team have all the necessary resources and information from the start? Were there assumptions we made early on that turned out to be incorrect? Was there a point where a different decision could have changed the trajectory? This isn't about finding someone to blame. It's about finding the key leverage points for improvement. In this analysis, you might discover that the project revealed a gap in your own skill set. Perhaps you realized you need to get better at managing stakeholder expectations or at using a specific type of project management software. That revelation isn't a weakness, it's a gift. It's a clear, actionable piece of feedback that tells you exactly where to focus your learning energy next. The failure didn't define you, it educated you. This entire process hinges on one powerful question that you can apply to any setback, large or small. Instead of asking, "Why does this always happen to me?" which leads to helplessness, ask, "What can this situation teach me about my approach?" This simple shift in language moves you from the passive role of a victim to the active role of a student. It forces your brain to engage in problem solving and pattern recognition rather than wallowing in disappointment. It aligns your mind with Stoic rationality, treating every event, especially the uncomfortable ones, as a teacher. So the next time you face an outcome that didn't match your hopes, create a small space for reflection and pose that question to yourself with genuine curiosity. You might be surprised at the clarity and direction your own wisdom provides. This practice of finding the lesson in the loss is powerful, but the Stoics took it a step further into a transformative daily habit, the conscious cultivation of gratitude. In the immediate aftermath of a failure, our focus narrows like a spotlight onto the one thing that's gone wrong. We become blind to everything else, as if that single missing piece has plunged our entire world into darkness. Stoicism asks us to flip that script, to actively and deliberately widen the beam of our attention to illuminate all that remains, all that is still good, and all that was never truly threatened by the setback in the first place. It is a conscious rebellion against the mind's natural negativity bias, a deliberate choice to inventory the abundance in our lives precisely when we feel most defined by lack. Seneca, who experienced exile, chronic illness, and the constant political danger of advising Emperor Nero, wrote extensively about this as a non-negotiable practice for a tranquil mind. He argued that true wealth is not in having more, but in wanting less and appreciating what you already possess. In one of his letters, he advises, "Let us cherish and love old age, for it is full of pleasure if one knows how to use it." Fruits are most welcome when almost over. Youth is most charming at its close. The last drink delights the intoxicated. His point is that the deepest appreciation often comes not from gluttonous consumption, but from a mindful savoring of what is present, especially when we are aware of its temporary nature. He wasn't suggesting we ignore loss or pretend it doesn't hurt. He was providing the antidote to the poison of taking things for granted. By focusing on the simple, steadfast pleasures, the health we still enjoy, the friends who stand by us, the comfort of a safe place to sleep, the ability to read and learn and think, we build a bulwark against despair. We are reminding ourselves that our world is far larger and more resilient than the single thing that we have lost. This practice does something profound to the architecture of our identity. When we are constantly chasing the next achievement, the next possession, or the next form of external validation, we are building an identity rooted in lack and what we do not yet have. This is an inherently unstable foundation. There will always be something more to acquire, and the fear of losing it will constantly haunt us. Gratitude, practiced the Stoic way, flips this dynamic entirely. It anchors our identity in a palpable sense of abundance, in what we already are and what we already have that cannot be easily taken away. Your identity is no longer, "I am someone who needs a promotion to be happy," but "I am someone who is grateful for the skills I get to use every day." It is not, "I am someone who needs to be in a relationship to be whole," but "I am someone who is grateful for the capacity to love and be loved by the friends and family in my life." This shift doesn't make you complacent or unambitious. It makes you secure. You can pursue goals from a place of inner fullness rather than inner emptiness, which makes you less desperate, less fearful, and ultimately more effective. The beautiful part is how simple this is to put into action, especially when you need it most. The next time a setback leaves you feeling shaken, whether it's a professional disappointment, a personal rejection, or just a day where nothing went right, make a deliberate choice to pause the spiral of negative thoughts. Take out a piece of paper, open a note on your phone, or simply sit quietly and name 3 things that are still going well. They don't have to be monumental. In fact, it's often the small, ordinary things that are most powerful because they highlight the stability of your everyday life. You might be grateful for the warm cup of coffee you had this morning, for the fact that your body is healthy enough to go for a walk, for a book that gives you comfort, for the pet that greets you with unconditional excitement, or for the simple fact that you have a mind capable of learning from this experience and growing stronger. This is not a Pollyanna-ish denial of difficulty. It is a strategic recalibration of your perspective. It is you, as the commander of your own mind, consciously directing your troops to defend the parts of your kingdom that are still thriving, rather than surrendering everything because one border town has been breached. So take that moment right now, in the middle of this very day, to ask yourself, what are 3 things I can be genuinely grateful for today, completely independent of any success or failure I may have experienced? While Stoicism powerfully equips us to find strength within ourselves, it is crucial to remember that this inner fortitude was never meant to be built in isolation. The Stoics placed immense value on the role of community, teachers, and mentors in our philosophical journey. They understood that wisdom is rarely discovered alone in a vacuum. It is often passed down, challenged, refined, and reinforced through our connections with others. This communal aspect acts as a vital counterbalance to the intensely personal work of inner reflection, grounding our efforts in shared humanity and providing crucial external mirrors that help us see ourselves more clearly. We see this profound appreciation for guidance beautifully expressed by none other than the emperor himself, Marcus Aurelius. At the very beginning of his meditations, he dedicates a lengthy section not to his own achievements, but to meticulously listing the character traits he learned from the various people in his life. He expresses specific gratitude to his grandfather for teaching him good morals, to his father for his integrity, and to his mother for her piety and generosity. He thanks the gods for good teachers and writes of one philosopher, "From Rusticus I learned to read carefully and not be satisfied with a rough overall understanding." This isn't a mere formality. It is a foundational Stoic practice of acknowledging that our character is a mosaic built from the positive influences of those around us. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, actively reminds himself that he did not become who he is by himself. He is the product of a community of teachers, and by consciously practicing this gratitude, he reinforces his own commitment to those virtues and remains humble, open to continued learning. This practice is far more than historical note-taking. It is a practical strategy for reducing the corrosive sense of isolation that often accompanies failure. When we stumble, our mind can become an echo chamber of self-criticism, amplifying our perceived flaws and convincing us that we are uniquely incapable. Sharing that struggle with a trusted mentor or a supportive community breaks that echo chamber instantly. It normalizes the experience. You quickly learn that the respected senior colleague you admire also faced devastating rejections early in their career. You discover that the friend who seems to have it all together also wrestles with imposter syndrome. This doesn't diminish your own challenge, but it recontextualizes it from a solitary catastrophe to a universal part of the human experience. It reinforces the Stoic idea that we are all citizens of the same world, navigating similar challenges, and that our shared vulnerability is actually a source of connection, not shame. In our modern world, this might look like intentionally seeking out a community of practice. This could be a local or online Stoic study group where you can discuss these principles and how they apply to real-world problems. It transforms philosophy from an abstract intellectual exercise into a lived, shared experience. When you hear how someone else applied the dichotomy of control to a stressful family situation, it gives you a new model for your own life. It could also be as simple as identifying a specific person in your life whose judgment you trust, a mentor, a coach, or even a wise friend, and making a habit of seeking their perspective before your own thoughts spiral. The act of verbalizing your problem to someone else forces you to structure your thinking more clearly, and their external viewpoint can often spot flaws in your reasoning or highlight strengths you've completely overlooked because you were too close to the situation. This creates a powerful feedback loop that is essential for building a resilient identity. Your internal work of journaling and reflection helps you identify your values and patterns. Then you take those insights to your community or mentor for external reality testing. They can offer encouragement, ask probing questions you hadn't considered, or share their own relevant experiences. This process doesn't weaken your self-reliance. It strengthens it by providing you with more tools, more perspectives, and more confidence in your chosen path. It ensures that your inner citadel is not a lonely fortress but a well-connected citadel within a larger, supportive network. So, as you continue to build your own resilience, take a moment to look around your life. Who are the people that have already offered you wisdom, whether they knew it or not? Who can you turn to not for sympathy, but for honest perspective the next time you face a setback and need help seeing the lesson within it? This ability to anchor ourselves in what is real and immediate is the very heart of Stoic mindfulness, a powerful practice that directly counters the anxiety that comes from dwelling on past mistakes or fearing future outcomes. While we often think of mindfulness as an Eastern import, the Stoics were championing a remarkably similar concept 2 millennia ago, teaching that our power and our peace are only ever found in the current moment. Epictetus, with his characteristic focus on what is within our control, offered a beautifully simple directive. Don't let your reflection on the whole sweep of life crush you. Don't fill your mind with all the bad things that might still happen. Stay with the present situation and ask, why is this so unbearable? Why can't I endure it? You'll be embarrassed to answer. His instruction isn't to ignore the past or the future entirely, but to refuse to let them colonize the present moment, where all your actual power to act resides. The mechanism behind this is profoundly liberating for our sense of self. When we are lost in rumination about a past failure, we are not just remembering an event. We are actively re-inhabiting the story of that event, re-experiencing the emotions, and most damagingly, reinforcing the identity of the person who failed. Similarly, when we are consumed with anxiety about a future risk, We are writing a fictional story about a potential future self who is humiliated, broke, or alone. We are, in effect, abandoning our true, present self to go live in a painful memory or a feared fantasy. Stoic mindfulness is the practice of catching yourself in the act of this abandonment and gently but firmly returning your attention to the one place where you are not a story, but a living, breathing being, the here and now. In the present moment, stripped of these fabricated narratives, you are not a success or a failure. You are simply a person who is sitting in a chair or walking down a street or reading these words. This is the ultimate cognitive distancing, creating space between your core awareness and the dramatic, identity-shaking stories your mind loves to tell. A practical way to cultivate this skill and ground yourself in the reality of the present is through a simple, Stoic-inspired breathing exercise. You don't need a quiet room or special equipment. You can do this anywhere, the moment you feel your thoughts spiraling into past regret or future worry. First, pause whatever you are doing, close your eyes if you can, or simply soften your gaze. Bring your full attention to the physical sensation of your breath. Feel the cool air entering your nostrils, the gentle expansion of your chest and belly, and the warm air leaving your body. Don't try to change your breathing, just observe it. Now expand your awareness to your other senses. What do you hear? The hum of a computer, distant traffic, the sound of your own heartbeat. What do you feel? The pressure of the floor beneath your feet, the texture of your clothing against your skin, the temperature of the air in the room. Spend just 60 seconds fully immersed in this sensory inventory. This isn't about achieving a state of bliss, it's about performing a reality check. It's a conscious recalibration that reminds you, whatever story my mind is telling me about my past or future, right now, in this exact moment, I am safe. I am whole, I am here. This brief pause doesn't make your problems disappear, but it does drain the anxious narrative of its overwhelming power, allowing you to address any real issues from a place of calm clarity rather than panicked reaction. The true goal is to weave this thread of present moment awareness throughout the fabric of your entire day, transforming it from an occasional exercise into a continuous orientation toward life. It's about noticing the warmth of the water on your hands while you wash the dishes, truly listening to the tone of a loved one's voice instead of just waiting for your turn to speak, or feeling the rhythm of your footsteps during a walk without mentally rehearsing a difficult conversation. Each time you gently guide your attention back from its wanderings into yesterday or tomorrow, you are strengthening your ability to show up for your own life as it happens. You are building an identity that is not constructed from the brittle material of past glories or future hopes, but is grounded in the resilient, ever-renewing reality of the present. So, as you move through the hours ahead, what is one small, ordinary moment where you can choose to be fully, completely there? But what if the very definition of success we've been chasing is the very source of our fragility? For centuries, society has handed us a ready-made checklist for a successful life. Climb the corporate ladder, accumulate wealth, gain recognition, acquire the right possessions, and earn the approval of others. We internalize these external metrics without ever stopping to ask if they align with our own values, and in doing so, we outsource the most important judgment of our lives to a world that doesn't know us. The Stoics saw this as a profound form of slavery, a voluntary imprisonment of the soul. Seneca, who moved in the highest circles of Roman power and witnessed the emptiness at its core, issued a blistering critique of this chase. He observed that wealth and fame are like salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. He wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." His target wasn't wealth itself, but the endless, anxious craving for it, the belief that our worth is contingent on acquiring more of what lies outside our control. He saw that those who chase external validation are forever running on a treadmill, exhausting themselves in pursuit of a finish line that keeps moving, their happiness always conditional on the next achievement, the next compliment, the next purchase. This is where the power of self-defined success comes in, and it is perhaps the most liberating step in building an identity that can withstand failure. When your measure of success is woven from the fabric of your own character, from virtues like integrity, courage, and compassion, you pull the pin from the grenade of external judgment. Failure in the conventional sense becomes almost impossible. Why? Because you cannot fail at being yourself. You can fall short of a sales target, but you cannot fail at acting with diligence. You can lose a competition, but you cannot fail at demonstrating sportsmanship. You might not get the promotion, but you cannot fail at treating your colleagues with respect and fairness. Your goals become process-oriented rather than outcome-oriented. The victory condition is no longer get the job, but prepare thoroughly and present my authentic self in the interview. It's no longer win the game, but play with full effort and respect for my opponents. This shift is revolutionary because it places the measurement of your success firmly within the boundaries of the dichotomy of control. You are now judging yourself by your efforts and your intentions, which are always yours to command, rather than by the results, which are never fully yours to determine. Consider a practical, modern example. Imagine two colleagues working in the same company. One defines success by the external metric of promotion. Their sense of worth skyrockets with each step up the ladder and plummets with every missed opportunity. Their emotional stability is tied directly to the decisions of a few managers in a closed-door meeting. The other colleague defines success by the internal metric of effort and growth. They focus on mastering their craft, contributing positively to their team, and learning new skills. A promotion for this person is a welcome acknowledgement, but a passed-over promotion is not a catastrophe. It's simply data. It might indicate a need to develop in a certain area, or it might reflect company politics that have nothing to do with their value. The first person's identity is on the line with every performance review. The second person's identity remains unshaken, allowing them to navigate corporate life with resilience, patience, and a far healthier perspective. Their self-worth is not a prize to be awarded by others. It is a practice they cultivate within themselves every single day. This invites a deeply personal and necessary reflection, one that requires quiet honesty away from the noise of the world's expectations. If you were to strip away all the voices telling you what you should want, the advertisements, the social media comparisons, the well-meaning advice from family, the silent pressure of your peers, what would be left? What does a life well lived truly look and feel like to you in your heart of hearts? Does it feel like making a positive impact on a few people rather than a massive impression on thousands? Does it mean having the freedom and time to pursue a passion project, regardless of its profitability? Is it the quiet pride of knowing you did your best, even when no one was watching? Defining your own measures of success isn't about rejecting ambition. It's about aligning your ambition with your character. It's about ensuring that the energy you expend in this world is in the service of building a life that feels authentic and meaningful to you, not one that simply looks impressive to everyone else. So ask yourself this defining question and listen carefully for the answer that comes from within, not from the crowd. What does success truly mean to you? This profound shift from chasing external validation to defining your own success naturally leads us to one of the most liberating yet challenging Stoic practices, the art of letting go. We've talked about holding our external labels lightly, but this goes a step further. It's about releasing our white-knuckled grip on the specific outcomes we believe are necessary for our happiness and our sense of self. The Stoics recognize that our deepest suffering doesn't come from not getting what we want, but from our ferocious, desperate attachment to the idea that we must have it. This attachment transforms a simple preference into a non-negotiable demand we place on the universe, and when the universe, as it inevitably does, fails to comply, we feel personally betrayed, as if reality itself has made a mistake. Epictetus, who understood the physics of human anguish better than most, offered the clearest instruction on this. He said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well." This is the core of the art of letting go. It is not passive resignation or apathy. It is an active, courageous alignment of your will with reality itself. It is the difference between shaking your fist at a storm and learning to dance in the rain. The first response leaves you drenched and furious. The second acknowledges the weather without letting it ruin your spirit. When you stop demanding that life conform to your specific blueprint for happiness, you open yourself up to finding joy and meaning in the blueprint that life actually provides. This is how you achieve what the Stoics called ataraxia, a state of serene tranquility that is unshakable because it is no longer dependent on the ever chang, ing, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. The mechanism by which this practice frees our identity is nothing short of transformative. When you are overly attached to a specific outcome, getting that job, being accepted into that school, having that person love you back, you essentially mortgage your self-worth to a future event that you cannot control. You are saying, consciously or not, "I cannot be okay unless this happens." Your identity becomes a hostage waiting for a ransom that the world may never pay. Letting go of that attachment is the act of freeing that hostage. It is reclaiming your identity and your capacity for well-being as your own sovereign property, to be enjoyed here and now, regardless of what tomorrow brings. You are no longer a person waiting for a promotion to feel successful. You are a successful person who is doing their job with excellence, and a promotion would be a nice bonus. You are not a person waiting for a relationship to feel whole. You are a whole person who is open to sharing your life with another, and a relationship would be a beautiful addition. This shift doesn't diminish your ambition or your desire for good things. It simply liberates those desires from the tyranny of necessity. Consider the common, yet deeply painful, experience of not getting into a desired school. The attachment looks like this. A student has worked for years, defined themselves by their academic goals, and pinned their entire future and self-image on the acceptance letter from this one institution. When the rejection arrives, it doesn't feel like a simple administrative decision. It feels like a verdict on their intelligence, their worth, and their entire future. The suffering is immense because their identity was so completely fused with that single, specific outcome. The practice of letting go, in the Stoic sense, would have begun long before the decision arrived. It would involve the student consciously affirming, "I have done my absolute best. I have controlled what I can control, my effort, my application, my character. The admissions decision is now outside my control. I deeply desire to attend this school, but my happiness and my value as a person do not depend on it. If I am accepted, I will be grateful. If I am not, I will be disappointed, but I will then turn my energy toward the other excellent paths available to me, knowing that my character, not my zip code, is what truly defines me." This mindset doesn't erase the disappointment, but it contains it, preventing it from metastasizing into a full-blown identity crisis. It allows the person to feel the emotion without becoming the emotion. This art is a daily practice, a constant gentle loosening of the grip. It's noticing the subtle tension in your body when you obsessively check your email for a response, or the anxiety that arises when you imagine a future that doesn't include your desired outcome. Each time you notice that tension, you have an opportunity to practice. You can take a deep breath and consciously release the demand that things must go your way. You can reaffirm that your peace is not for sale, that your identity is not up for negotiation based on external events. You can choose to trust that your ability to act with virtue is enough, no matter what happens. So bring this down to your own life right now. What is that one outcome you are holding onto so tightly that your knuckles are white? Is it a particular career milestone? A specific person's approval, a financial goal, a desired lifestyle? Look at it honestly and ask yourself, what would it feel like to hold that desire in an open palm instead of a clenched fist? To want it, to work for it, but to release the desperate need for it. That small act of release isn't giving up. It is the ultimate declaration of your own inner freedom. This profound sense of inner freedom, this ability to hold our desires with an open hand, is deeply connected to another vital Stoic strength, the practice of humility. In a world that often celebrates unwavering confidence and bulletproof self-assurance, Stoicism offers a counterintuitive but incredibly powerful path to resilience through the honest acknowledgement that we don't have all the answers. Stoic humility isn't about self-deprecation or thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less often and more accurately. It's about recognizing the limits of our own perspective and understanding that every person we meet and every situation we encounter, especially our failures, has something to teach us if we are only willing to listen. This open-handedness with our ego allows us to transform every piece of criticism and every unexpected outcome into raw material for building a wiser, more adaptable self. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who could have easily surrounded himself with sycophants and yes-men, constantly reminded himself of the crucial importance of this virtue. In his meditations, he wrote, "If anyone can show me and prove to me that I am wrong in thought or deed, I will gladly change. I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." The one who is harmed is the one who persists in his own self-deception and ignorance. For him, the pursuit of truth and the betterment of his own character were infinitely more important than the protection of his ego. He saw criticism not as a personal attack to be deflected, but as a potential gift, a rare and valuable opportunity to see a blind spot he had missed. He understood that his position of power made him more susceptible to error, not less, because fewer people would dare to correct him. His humility was his defense against the corruption and isolation of absolute authority, a way to ensure he remained connected to reality and continued to grow. This radical openness to feedback is one of the most practical ways we can strengthen our identity rather than weaken it. The fragile ego, the one built on a foundation of external validation, sees criticism as a threat to its very existence. It must either immediately counterattack to discredit the source or internalize the feedback as a global, damning verdict, both of which are destructive reactions. The resilient Stoic identity, grounded in the unwavering knowledge that its worth comes from its commitment to virtue and growth, sees the exact same criticism through a completely different lens. It can receive the feedback, however poorly delivered, and perform a calm, internal triage. It asks, is there a kernel of truth here that I can use to improve? Is this pointing to a gap in my knowledge or a flaw in my approach? If so, I can accept that useful part with gratitude and discard the rest, including any harsh tone or unfair framing. This process doesn't diminish you, it fortifies you. It proves to yourself that you are more committed to getting better than you are to looking good, which is the hallmark of genuine confidence. Imagine a common scenario at work. You've just presented a proposal you spent weeks crafting. A colleague, perhaps in front of others, points out a significant flaw in your financial projections. The initial, ego-driven reaction is a hot flush of embarrassment followed by a defensive justification. Well, I was working with outdated figures, or that's not the most important part of the proposal anyway. This defensive posture might save face for a moment, but it costs you a chance to improve and subtly reinforces a brittle identity that can't withstand being wrong. The Stoic approach, guided by humility, would be to take a breath and lean into the discomfort. You might respond with, "Thank you for catching that. You're right, I need to revise those numbers. I appreciate you pointing it out." This simple shift transforms the moment from a public failure into a public demonstration of your integrity and commitment to the project's success. You haven't been weakened, you've been strengthened. You've shown yourself and everyone else that your ego is not so fragile that it can't handle being wrong, and that the quality of the work is more important to you than the illusion of your own infallibility. This is how humility becomes a superpower in the real world. This practice requires us to reframe our entire relationship with being incorrect. We are taught from a young age that being wrong is bad, something to be ashamed of and avoided at all costs. But the Stoics would argue that being wrong is simply a data point on the map of your understanding, and the only true failure is refusing to correct your course once the error has been shown to you. The sting of criticism, that initial flash of heat and defensiveness, is not a sign that you are inadequate. It is a signal that you are being presented with an opportunity to learn. It is the friction that precedes growth. Think back on your own journey. Can you recall a time when you received feedback that was difficult to hear in the moment, but that ultimately led to a significant improvement in your skills, your relationships, or your understanding of yourself? Perhaps a coach corrected your form, an editor tore apart your first draft, or a friend gave you a gentle but honest perspective on a behavior that was pushing people away. That initial sting was the price of admission for a valuable lesson, and your willingness to lean into that discomfort was a direct investment in the person you are today. This brings us to the very heart of Stoic resilience, the moment where philosophy transforms into action, the courage to try again. It's one thing to intellectually accept a setback, to reframe it with gratitude, or to understand it cognitively. It is something else entirely to dust yourself off, confront the very real possibility of another failure, and step back into the arena. The Stoics were not philosophers of passive acceptance. They were philosophers of courageous engagement with the world. They understood that a virtue like courage is not a theoretical concept to be admired, but a muscle to be exercised, and it only grows stronger through repeated use, especially when that use follows a fall. Seneca, who wrote extensively on the topic of fear and perseverance, offered a brilliantly practical insight into this process. He observed, "There are more things, Lucilius, that frighten us than injure us, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." His advice for overcoming this paralyzing anticipation was simple and direct: action. He believed that the only way to conquer the fear of failure was to move through it, to prove to yourself through experience that the thing you feared is rarely as catastrophic as your mind had painted it to be. Each time you act in spite of your fear, you drain a little more of its power until eventually it becomes a manageable companion on your journey rather than a monstrous barrier blocking your path. This is the essence of the Stoic view on courage. It is not the absence of fear, but the judgment that something else is more important than fear. It is the decision that your commitment to your purpose, your virtue, or your growth is greater than your desire to remain safe and avoid discomfort. This redefinition is crucial because it makes courage accessible to everyone. We often have a cultural image of courage as a kind of fearlessness possessed by heroes in movies, a superhuman lack of anxiety in the face of danger. This standard is so impossibly high that it can make our own trepidation feel like a personal failing. But the Stoic hero is not the person who feels no fear. The Stoic hero is the inventor who feels the sting of 100 failed prototypes but begins work on the 101st. It is the writer who receives a stack of rejection letters yet sits down to face the blank page once more. It is the entrepreneur whose first venture collapses, taking their savings with it, but who has the fortitude to analyze the wreckage, extract the lessons, and start drafting plans for a new one. These individuals are not unafraid. They are intimately acquainted with fear, disappointment, and doubt. Their courage lies in their refusal to allow those feelings to have the final vote on their actions. They understand that the goal is not to eliminate the inner critic or the voice of anxiety, but to develop a louder, more compelling inner voice, the voice of your reasoned choice, your values, and your will that says, "I hear you, but we are moving forward anyway." History is filled with these paragons of perseverance who embody this Stoic principle. Consider the story of Thomas Edison, who reportedly failed thousands of times in his quest to create a functional electric light bulb. When a reporter asked him how it felt to fail so many times, his famous reply was pure Stoic reframing. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." He did not interpret each unsuccessful attempt as a verdict on his ability. He interpreted it as data that brought him incrementally closer to a solution. His identity was not Edison the failure. It was Edison the relentless problem solver. His courage was renewed with each experiment because his focus was on the integrity of the process, the careful observation, the adjustment of variables, the unwavering commitment to the goal, not on the binary outcome of a single test. His courage was active, persistent, and deeply aligned with the Stoic virtue of sticking to a worthwhile task despite external obstacles. Your own life right now holds similar opportunities to exercise this specific type of courage. It likely isn't about inventing a new technology, but the principle is identical. It's the courage to have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding, even though you're afraid it might not go well. It's the courage to apply for a job that feels like a stretch, even though you fear you might not be qualified. It's the courage to re-engage with a hobby or a skill at which you were once proficient but have since gotten rusty, willingly embracing the initial phase of awkwardness and incompetence. It's the courage to trust again after a heartbreak, to invest again after a financial loss, or to lead again after a project failed under your guidance. In each of these cases, the Stoic move is to acknowledge the fear fully, to grant it its existence, and then to make a conscious, value-based decision. You ask yourself, is my desire to avoid potential discomfort greater than my commitment to living a life of connection, growth, or integrity? The answer to that question is what summons the courage to take the next step. So look at the landscape of your own experiences. Where is there a door you closed after a setback, a path you abandoned because it became difficult? Where can you today choose to act in accordance with your virtues, not in the absence of your fear, but precisely in spite of it? Yet this relentless pursuit of more, this constant expansion of our desires, comes with a hidden and incredibly steep price tag: our freedom. The Stoics argued that every desire we cultivate for something external is like adding another link to a chain that binds us to fortune's whims. The more we want, the more vulnerable we become, because our happiness is then held hostage by countless external conditions that must all align perfectly for us to feel content. Epictetus, with his signature clarity, put it in the starkest terms: Freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. He isn't talking about becoming an emotionless ascetic. He's describing a profound psychological truth. When you reduce the number of things you believe you need to be happy, you dramatically shrink the surface area that life can attack. You become like a fortress with fewer gates to defend, making you far more resilient to the inevitable sieges of misfortune. This practice of simplifying our wants is the essence of Stoic minimalism, and it is a direct path to liberating our identity. The goal is to perform a rigorous audit of our desires, to carefully distinguish between our authentic needs and our manufactured wants. A need is something essential to our survival and our ability to practice virtue, basic sustenance, shelter, human connection. A want is everything else: the luxury car, the latest gadget, the social status, the perfect aesthetic for our home. There's nothing inherently wrong with these wants, but the Stoic warning is about the emotional investment we place in them. When we say, "I need that new phone to be happy," we have voluntarily handed a piece of our inner peace over to a corporation, a product launch, and our bank account. We have, in Epictetus's words, agreed to become a slave to that desire. Its absence will cause us pain, and its presence will only create a temporary relief before the next desire emerges, starting the cycle of servitude all over again. The ultimate reward for breaking this cycle is not a life of poverty, but a life of profound freedom and resilience. Imagine experiencing a significant financial loss, a job layoff, or an unexpected major expense. For the person whose identity and happiness are tied to a high-consumption lifestyle, this event is catastrophic. It doesn't just represent a numerical change in a bank account. It feels like an eviction notice from their entire sense of self. Their peace of mind, their social standing, and their self-worth are all suddenly under threat. Now, contrast that with the person who has consciously practiced simplifying their desires. They have already found contentment in reading library books instead of buying hardcovers, in cooking meals at home with friends instead of expensive restaurant outings, in enjoying nature walks instead of lavish vacations. The financial loss is still a practical challenge that must be addressed, but it is not an existential crisis. Their happiness was never stored in those external things to begin with. Their identity, built on friendships, learning, and simple pleasures, remains intact and unshaken. The storm may rage outside, but they are standing in a sturdy cabin, not a house of cards. This isn't about imposing a life of lack. It's about discovering the incredible abundance that was already present in a simpler way of living. It's the freedom to walk through a shopping mall and feel no compulsive pull to acquire anything. It's the liberation of realizing your weekend doesn't need to be expensive to be enriching. It's the resilience that comes from knowing that even if you lost every non-essential possession you own, your core self would be absolutely fine. This is the deep, unassailable peace that Epictetus promised, a peace that comes not from acquiring everything you want, but from not wanting so much in the first place. So consider your own life for a moment. Look at your routines, your spending habits, your aspirations. What is one desire, one want that you have been treating as a need, that you could consciously simplify or even let go of entirely? What would it feel like to release that particular link in the chain and taste a little more of that Stoic freedom today? But what do we do with the fire of frustration once we've mustered the courage to try again, only to be met with another obstacle? Those moments can ignite a raw and powerful emotion, anger. It feels like a righteous response to injustice, a boiling over of pent-up effort meeting relentless resistance. The Stoics, however, saw anger not as a righteous fire, but as a temporary madness, a brief insanity that clouds judgment and leads us to act against our own best interests. They weren't advocates for suppressing emotion, but for alchemizing it, for taking that raw, chaotic energy and transmuting it into something purposeful and constructive. This is the profound practice of transforming our emotional fuel, and it begins with a radical shift in perception. Marcus Aurelius provided the perfect mantra for this inner alchemy. He advised himself, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Read that again. The obstacle itself is not a barrier to your path. It is the very material you will use to build the path forward. This is the ultimate cognitive reframe for anger. That frustrating person who constantly criticizes your work. They are not an interruption to your progress. They are your personal trainer for patience and clarity under pressure. The maddening bureaucratic delay that's holding up your project, it is not a pointless waste of time. It is an unexpected gift of time to refine your plans, to double-check your assumptions, to make your eventual execution even more precise and powerful. The anger you feel is a signal that you care deeply, but it is a terrible strategist. Your job is to honor the energy behind the signal while dismissing the destructive plans the anger suggests. At its core, anger almost always stems from a collision between reality and our expectations. We expect the world to be fair, for our effort to be rewarded, for people to be reasonable. When reality inevitably fails to meet these silent demands, the emotional result is frustration, which quickly curdles into anger. The Stoic solution is not to lower your standards, but to recalibrate your expectations to align with the nature of the world itself. Expect that people will sometimes act selfishly or foolishly. Then, when they do, it is a confirmation of your understanding, not a betrayal of your hopes. Expect that complex projects will encounter unforeseen delays and complications. Then, when they arise, you are prepared to meet them as a standard part of the process, not a personal affront. This isn't pessimism, it is preparedness. By expecting obstacles, you disarm them of their power to surprise and enrage you. The emotion you save by not being caught off guard is then energy you can invest in solving the problem itself. The crucial moment of transformation occurs in the breath between the trigger and our reaction. This is where we reclaim our agency. The next time you feel that familiar heat rising in your chest, that tightening in your jaw, your first and most important task is to do absolutely nothing. Do not speak, do not type that email, do not make that decision. Simply pause. If you can, physically remove yourself from the situation for even 60 seconds. Step outside, walk to the bathroom, focus on your breathing. This pause creates a critical gap, a space where your higher reasoning can catch up to your primal emotional response. In that space, you can ask yourself a few deliberate questions. What specific expectation of mine was just violated? Is that expectation reasonable, or was it a demand I was placing on the universe? What is the actual, factual reality of this situation, stripped of my emotional story about it? And most importantly, what is one constructive action I can take right now that would actually improve the situation? This is how we channel the energy. The frustration over a creative block can be channeled into the energy for a brisk walk to clear your head, followed by a new approach to the problem. The anger at a colleague's dismissive comment can be channeled into the energy to schedule a calm, one-on-one conversation to seek understanding. The fury at a personal setback can be channeled into the determined energy to draft a new plan, to learn a new skill, to prove your resilience to yourself. The emotion is the fuel, your virtuous intention is the engine. The goal is to build a mental habit where frustration automatically becomes a cue for focused action, not for an outburst. So the next time you feel that surge of negative energy, see it not as a problem to be extinguished, but as a powerful resource waiting to be directed. How will you choose to use that energy? What single, small, constructive step can it power for you today? This long view of our lives is exactly what Seneca had in mind when he offered one of his most comforting and perspective-shifting pieces of wisdom. He wrote, "We should measure our lives by their entirety, not by their individual fragments." Think about the profound difference between those two approaches. One involves zooming in on a single, grainy pixel, a failed project, a rejected proposal, a harsh word spoken in anger, and declaring that this one blurry dot is the entire picture of who you are. The other involves stepping back to see the magnificent, sprawling tapestry of a whole life, woven over decades with countless threads of intention, effort, kindness, and resilience. The first approach is a recipe for perpetual anxiety and a fragile sense of self. The second is the foundation of an unshakable identity. A single fragment, no matter how dark or disappointing, cannot define the entire mosaic. It is simply one piece of data in a much larger and more beautiful story. This shift in time frame is how we finally break free from the tyranny of the present moment. When you are in the middle of a setback, it feels all-consuming. It dominates your field of vision, blotting out everything that came before it and everything that might come after. It's like being a sailor on a vast ocean who becomes fixated on a single wave crashing over the bow, forgetting that the ship has safely navigated thousands of such waves and is built to withstand thousands more. The practice of taking the long view is the mental equivalent of climbing up to the crow's nest. From that higher vantage point, you can see the entire journey, the calm seas and the storms you've already weathered, the distant port you're steadily moving toward, and the undeniable truth that this one wave, however large, is a temporary part of the voyage, not its destination. Your identity isn't forged in the spray of a single wave. It is tempered by the quality of your seamanship across the entire ocean. Consider the arc of a long and meaningful career. Imagine a teacher who has dedicated 40 years to the classroom. Within that span, there will be lessons that fell flat, students they couldn't reach, and years where they felt burnt out and questioned their impact. If they were to define their entire professional identity by any one of those difficult years, they would miss the true story. Their legacy is not in that one failed lesson plan, but in the gentle consistency they showed every single day. It's in the thousands of small encouragements offered, the countless hours of patient explanation, and the quiet pride of seeing generations of students grow into capable, compassionate adults. Their identity as an educator is built not on the absence of failure, but on the profound cumulative effect of showing up again and again with care and commitment. The setbacks are not erased from the record, but they are put in their proper proportion, as minor episodes in a much grander narrative of contribution. This is the ultimate question that can guide us through any temporary difficulty, and it's one worth sitting with for a long time. How do you want to be remembered? Not for the trophies on your shelf or the zeros in your bank account, but for the quality of your character that people experienced when they interacted with you. When your name comes up in conversation years from now, what is the first thing you hope people will say? Do you want to be remembered as someone who was authentically kind, even when it was difficult? As someone whose integrity was unwavering, even when cutting corners would have been easier? As someone who faced adversity with courage and never lost their sense of hope? These are the true measures of a life. A single failure cannot tarnish a legacy of kindness. A moment of rejection cannot undo a lifetime of integrity. These virtues are cumulative and compounding. They grow stronger and more defining with each consistent choice to embody them, creating a legacy that is literally failure-proof. So let this question reshape your relationship with whatever challenge you are facing right now. That project that didn't work out, That opportunity that slipped through your fingers, how important will it seem when viewed from the end point of your life? It will likely be a footnote, a single sentence in a long and rich biography. What will truly matter, what will form the core chapters of that story, are the answers to a different set of questions. Did you act with honor? Did you learn from your mistakes? Did you treat people with respect? Did you leave things better than you found them? Your legacy is not a single monument to be unveiled at the end. It is a path you are laying down brick by brick with every virtuous choice you make today. And that is a project that no momentary setback can ever destroy. But this relentless pursuit of virtue, this constant striving to meet a high standard, brings us to a vital and often overlooked aspect of Stoic wisdom, the necessity of self-compassion. It's easy to misinterpret Stoicism as a philosophy of cold, unyielding self-criticism, where any deviation from perfect rationality is a mark of failure. However, a closer look reveals that the most profound Stoic thinkers were deeply realistic about human nature. They understood that we are not perfectly rational sages. We are flawed, feeling, and fantastically imperfect creatures on a long journey of progress. Marcus Aurelius himself, while holding himself to an incredibly high standard, frequently reminded himself of this reality. In his Meditations, he writes, "I am a man, and nothing that touches a man is foreign to me." He acknowledges his shared humanity with all its weaknesses. He doesn't expect perfection from himself, he expects diligent effort. This is the critical balance, holding a rigorous intention for your actions while holding a compassionate space for your humanity when you inevitably fall short. The goal is not to never feel the sting of a mistake, but to prevent that sting from festering into a paralyzing shame that halts your progress entirely. This is where the practice of self-compassion becomes your most powerful ally. Think of it as the essential lubricant for the engine of your growth. Without it, the friction of every minor failure can cause the entire mechanism to seize up. Shame in the wake of an error whispers a destructive lie. You have failed, therefore you are a failure. It globalizes a specific event into a total identity, and in doing so, it makes the prospect of trying again feel terrifying. Why would you risk another confirmation of your inherent inadequacy? Self-compassion interrupts this toxic narrative. It allows you to say, "I made a mistake." This is a painful but normal part of being human. It does not define my entire worth. I can feel disappointment without becoming disappointment. This isn't about letting yourself off the hook or making excuses. It is about applying the same Stoic rationality to your own inner world that you apply to external events. You would not scream at a knife for being dull. You would simply sharpen it. Self-compassion is how you sharpen yourself. It is the calm, analytical process of learning from the error without adding the corrosive layer of self-flagellation that only damages the tool further. A profoundly simple yet effective way to cultivate this is to borrow a practice from modern psychology. Treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would automatically offer a dear friend who came to you with the same problem. Imagine your closest friend called you, devastated because they had spoken harshly in a moment of stress, mismanaged an important project, or failed to meet a personal goal. Would you respond with cold condemnation? Would you list all their flaws and tell them they are hopeless? Of course not. You would likely listen with empathy, acknowledge their pain, remind them of their strengths and past successes, and help them brainstorm a way forward. You would see the mistake in the context of their whole, wonderful character. Now turn that same voice inward. When you catch yourself spiraling into self-criticism after a misstep, pause and ask, what would I say to my best friend if they were in my exact situation? Then deliberately offer those same words of wisdom and encouragement to yourself. This practice bridges the gap between Stoic rigor and human tenderness. It allows you to hold yourself accountable without resorting to cruelty, to learn the lesson without wearing the shame. So the next time you stumble, take a breath and extend that hand of friendship inward. How can you offer yourself the grace and compassion you so freely give to others, recognizing that this kindness is not a weakness, but the very thing that gives you the strength to get back up and continue your journey toward virtue? This incredible flexibility in the face of change is a hallmark of the Stoic mindset, and it's rooted in a deep understanding of nature itself. The Stoics observed that the universe is in a constant state of flux. Seasons change, empires rise and fall, and our own lives are a series of unpredictable twists and turns. To try to resist this fundamental truth is like trying to hold back the tide with your bare hands. It's not just futile, it's exhausting and ultimately leads to our own destruction. Instead, Stoicism teaches us to emulate the flexibility of nature itself. Think of a tall reed standing by the edge of a river. When a powerful storm blows through, a mighty but rigid oak tree might snap under the force of the wind, its branches shattered. But the reed, by contrast, possesses a profound strength through its suppleness. It bends all the way to the ground if it has to, allowing the storm to pass directly over it. When the winds calm, the reed simply springs back upright, unharmed and ready for the next day. Its survival wasn't in defiance of the storm, but in its intelligent, graceful adaptation to it. This is the kind of resilient Stoicism aims to cultivate in us, not the brittle strength of unchanging rigidity, but the resilient strength of purposeful flexibility. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave and understood powerlessness and change on a visceral level, gave us the perfect mantra for this practice. He said, "Make the best of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This single sentence is a masterclass in adaptive thinking. The first part, "Make the best of what is in your power," is our anchor. It's our commitment to our virtues, our efforts, and our intentions which never change. The second part, "And take the rest as it happens," is our flexibility. It's our willing acceptance that the external world will unfold according to its own logic, not ours, and that our job is not to complain about the script, but to play our role within it to the very best of our ability. This philosophy builds an identity that can survive any change because it isn't welded to a single, fixed outcome. A rigid identity says, "I am a corporate lawyer, and that is all I can ever be." When the legal industry changes or personal circumstances shift, that identity has nowhere to go and it shatters. A flexible identity says, "I am a person who possesses analytical skill, a strong work ethic, and a deep sense of justice." For the last 20 years, I have expressed those virtues through the practice of law. If a change arrives, this person is not destroyed. They can adapt. They can pivot their skills into mediation, teaching, compliance, or advocacy for a non-profit. The core virtues remain the same, only the external expression of those virtues has changed. The reed bends, it does not break. We can see a powerful modern example of this in the increasingly common experience of a midlife career change. Imagine someone who has built a successful and stable identity over decades as, say, a print journalist. They derive their sense of purpose, their social standing, and their financial security from this role. Then the media landscape transforms. Newspapers decline, digital platforms rise, and the demand for their specific skill set evaporates. The rigid response is to see this change as a personal catastrophe, to rage against the industry, to mourn the loss of the good old days, and to cling desperately to a vanishing world, all the while feeling that your very self is becoming obsolete. The Stoic, flexible response is vastly different. It begins with acceptance. The world of media has changed. This is the reality I must work with. Then, it moves to a creative adaptation of one's core virtues. That journalist's core skills aren't useless, they are highly transferable. Their ability to research deeply, to communicate complex ideas clearly, to tell compelling stories, these are virtues that are needed in countless new fields. They could bend with the wind and adapt their skills to content strategy for a tech company, to ghostwriting for executives, to creating a successful independent newsletter, or to teaching communications at a local college. Their identity successfully survives because it was never truly about the byline in a physical newspaper. It was always about the deeper character traits that made them good at their job in the first place. The form changed, but the function remained. This kind of adaptability isn't a passive surrender to circumstance. It is an active, creative engagement with it. It's about looking at the new landscape, however unexpected or unwelcome, and asking, given this new reality, how can I best express my character here? How can I use my virtues to make a positive impact within these new constraints? This is how we practice the art of the bend. It might mean letting go of a specific job title you cherished, but finding new ways to use your mentoring skills in a different role. It could involve releasing a dream of a particular kind of retirement and instead discovering a fulfilling encore career you never saw coming. It might even mean adapting your definition of a good day when faced with a health challenge, finding profound value in smaller, quieter victories. The practice is to regularly check in with yourself and identify the areas where you are holding on too tightly to a specific form, where your rigidity might be setting you up for a break. So where in your own life can you begin to loosen your grip? Where can you practice a little more of that Stoic flexibility, not as a compromise, but as a creative and powerful strategy for enduring and thriving, no matter which way the wind blows? But what if the story you've been telling yourself about that setback is the very thing keeping you stuck? We are, each of us, the authors of our own lives, but we often forget that the most important story we write is the one we tell ourselves in the quiet moments after something goes wrong. The facts of an event are one thing: the project did not get funded, the relationship ended, the opportunity was missed, but the narrative we wrap around those facts is something else entirely. It is in this space between the raw event and the story we tell about it that we find one of the most powerful applications of Stoic wisdom, the ability to consciously rewrite our internal narrative to build resilience rather than despair. Marcus Aurelius touched on this core truth when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." His insight was that while we cannot always control what happens, we always, without exception, retain control over the meaning we assign to what happens. The event is neutral until we label it. The narrative is ours to choose. This is where a simple shift in language can transform your entire experience of failure. Notice the profound difference between the statement, "I failed," and the statement, "I learned." The first is a permanent verdict on your identity, a life sentence with no possibility of parole. It defines you by the outcome. The second is a statement of growth, a temporary report on a specific experience that implies forward motion and future development. The Stoic practice is to catch yourself in the act of writing a catastrophic final draft of a story that is still very much in progress. That presentation that didn't land as you'd hoped isn't a story titled, "The Day I Proved I Was an Imposter." It's a chapter in a longer work called "How I Refined My Communication Skills." That business venture that didn't succeed isn't a tragedy called "My Big Mistake." It's a research document filled with invaluable data for your next, more informed attempt. By changing the title of the story, you change your entire relationship to the event. You move from being a victim of the plot to being its author. One of the most effective ways to practice this narrative shift is through a targeted journaling exercise. Set aside 10 minutes of quiet time and bring to mind a recent setback, something that still carries a bit of a sting. Write down the bare facts of what happened, as if you were a neutral journalist reporting the event. Just the who, what, when, and where. Now read what you've written. This is the unchangeable foundation. Next, write down the story you've been telling yourself about it. This is likely filled with judgment and emotion. I was so unprepared. They must think I'm incompetent. This ruins everything. See this story for what it is, one interpretation, not the ultimate truth. Now here is the act of profound authorial power. Write a third version. This time, reframe the entire narrative using Stoic principles. Focus on what was within your control, your effort, your preparation, your intentions. Mine the event for its lessons. What did it teach you about your industry, your own strengths, or areas for improvement? How did it offer you a chance to practice courage, patience, or humility? This new story isn't a naive, positive thinking denial of difficulty. It is a wiser, more nuanced, and ultimately more empowering story that acknowledges the pain while spotlighting the growth. It is a story that your resilient, virtue-based self would tell. So, as you consider the landscape of your own experiences, where is there a story that has been causing you pain? What recent setback have you been narrating with a voice of finality and judgment? How can you take up the pen today and change just one line of that story, turning a tale of failure into a lesson in growth, and in doing so, remind yourself that you are not a character trapped in a single chapter, but the author of the entire book. This profound sense of being part of a vast and interconnected whole is one of the most beautiful and humbling aspects of Stoic philosophy. It asks us to shift our gaze from the narrow, often anxious spotlight we keep on our individual lives and to instead step back and see ourselves as a single thread in a magnificent, sprawling tapestry of humanity and the cosmos itself. The Stoics called this sympatheia the idea that everything in the universe is interconnected and interdependent, and that our rational nature is a small but vital piece of a much larger rational whole. This isn't just a poetic notion, it's a practical psychological tool designed to dissolve the isolating and often paralyzing focus on our individual ego. When we are mired in a personal failure, our world can shrink to the size of that single problem, making it appear monstrous and all-consuming. But by consciously connecting to something larger than ourselves, we reintroduce a sense of scale. Our problem doesn't disappear, but it is placed in its proper context as one event in a vast network of events, one story among billions of other stories unfolding simultaneously. Marcus Aurelius, from his position of immense solitary power, constantly reminded himself of this truth to guard against arrogance and to find solace in difficulty. He wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." With this simple analogy, he captures the essence of Stoic citizenship. Your life, with all its unique triumphs and stumbles, is not a solo performance. It is your contribution to the human hive. Your actions matter not because they make you individually famous or successful, but because they either benefit or harm the collective whole of which you are an inseparable part. He famously urged himself to remember that he was a citizen of the world first and foremost, long before any other title or role. This cosmic perspective is the ultimate antidote to the poison of self-importance. When you are feeling sorry for yourself after a setback, consider the countless other people who are facing their own challenges at this very moment. When you are puffed up with pride after a success, consider the infinite expanse of the universe and the brief, flickering moment of your existence within it. This is not meant to make your life feel insignificant, but to liberate it from the crushing weight of your own ego. Your value is not in being the single most important character in the story. It is in playing your part well within an epic narrative that is far grander than you can imagine. We can bring this lofty philosophical concept down to earth with a very practical and powerful example: the act of volunteering your time to help others. Imagine you are struggling with a deep sense of professional failure. Perhaps you were laid off or a project you spearheaded was cancelled. It's incredibly easy to fall into a spiral of rumination, replaying events in your mind and wondering what you did wrong, your sense of self-worth becoming smaller and more fragile with each loop. Now imagine you make a choice to step out of that mental echo chamber. You spend an afternoon serving meals at a local shelter, or you tutor a child who is struggling with reading, or you help clean up a neighborhood park. In that moment, your focus is forcibly shifted from your internal narrative to the immediate, tangible needs of another person or your community. You are no longer the protagonist of a drama about failure. You are simply a helpful human being, using your hands and your heart to make a small part of the world slightly better. You witness resilience in others. You hear stories of different kinds of hardship and overcoming, and your own problem begins to find its proper proportion. It hasn't vanished, but it is now sitting alongside other concerns, other struggles. This act of service is a direct, lived experience of sympatheia. You are actively strengthening the hive, and in doing so, you are reminded of your inherent value as a contributing member of it, regardless of your job title or latest outcome. Your identity expands from "I am someone who failed" to "I am someone who helps." This connection provides a powerful twofold comfort when we face personal failure. First, it offers perspective. Your failed business venture or your rejected application feels very different when viewed against the backdrop of universal human striving. It becomes not a unique tragedy, but a shared human experience. You are participating in the same dance of trial and error that every innovator, artist, and entrepreneur throughout history has known. Second, and more importantly, it provides a new and unwavering source of meaning. If your sense of purpose was solely tied to that one venture or that one goal, its failure can feel like a total loss of purpose. But if your deeper purpose is tied to your role as a citizen of the world, to acting with justice, kindness, and contribution wherever you are, then no single external failure can ever take that away from you. You can lose your business and still be a good citizen by how you treat your employees during the wind down. You can lose a competition and still be a good citizen by congratulating the winner with genuine grace. Your purpose becomes portable, resilient, and eternally available. So as you reflect on your own life, consider how this shift in perspective might change your relationship to your current challenges. How does the simple act of remembering your connection to a larger whole help to soften the sharp edges of a personal setback and reveal a more enduring path forward? We have explored a great many Stoic ideas, from the dichotomy of control to the view from above, but a philosophy is only as powerful as its practice. These concepts are not meant to be admired from a distance like museum pieces. They are tools for daily living, designed to be used, worn smooth by the constant grip of your attention until they become an unconscious extension of your mind. Building an identity that can withstand failure is not a single monumental act of will. It is the patient, consistent work of laying one brick of habit upon another, day after day, until you have constructed an inner citadel so sturdy that the storms of circumstance cannot breach its walls. This final work is about the mortar that holds it all together, the daily rituals and small, deliberate practices that transform lofty philosophy into lived resilience. Think of these practices not as a burdensome checklist, but as a kind of daily hygiene for the soul, a way to cleanse your mind of the clutter of unhelpful judgments and reinforce the architecture of your character. We have already discussed some of these tools in depth. the evening journaling that allows you to separate your actions from your self-worth, the premeditatio malorum that inoculates you against the fear of adversity, and the mindfulness that anchors you firmly in the power of the present moment. The true magic, however, lies not in performing them perfectly once in a while, but in the unwavering consistency of their application. It is the repetition itself that forges neural pathways, carving channels in your mind so that your default response to a setback gradually shifts from panic to perspective, from self-recrimination to calm analysis. This is a marathon of character building, not a sprint, and it is run one single, mindful step at a time. Seneca, in his letters to his friend Lucilius, emphasized this exact point with his characteristic clarity. He wrote, "I shall never cease to benefit myself with the daily lesson, and though people may say, 'How long will you go on learning?' my answer is, so long as I am ignorant, and I am learning still, for the daily lesson is the one I need." This is the attitude to cultivate. The goal is not to graduate from these practices, as if you could one day achieve a state where you no longer need to tend to your mental fortitude. The goal is to embrace the process itself as the destination, to find value in the daily effort of sharpening your saw, knowing that a tool left to dull will fail you when you need it most. Perfection is a mirage that leads to frustration. Consistent, gentle effort is the well that will never run dry. The prospect of integrating all of this at once can feel overwhelming, which is precisely why the most effective approach is to start microscopically small. Do not attempt to launch into an hour of journaling and meditation overnight. That is a recipe for burnout and self-judgment. Instead, choose just one practice that resonates with you most deeply right now. Perhaps it is the 5-minute nightly review, where you simply ask yourself Seneca's 3 questions without judgment. Maybe it is spending 60 seconds each morning visualizing one potential challenge for the day ahead and how you might meet it with virtue. It could be as simple as committing to a single mindful breath before you check your email in the morning, creating a tiny space between stimulus and reaction. The scale is irrelevant, the commitment is everything. A practice that feels effortless to maintain is infinitely more valuable than an ambitious one that you abandon after a week. The objective is to build the muscle of consistency, and that is best done with very light weights at the very beginning. So as we near the end of our exploration, the most important question you can ask yourself is not which Stoic principle you find most interesting, but which single, small, daily practice you can reliably commit to in order to weave that principle into the very fabric of your being. Which brick will you lay today? Will it be the brick of reflection, of prepared acceptance, or of present moment awareness? Your resilient identity is waiting to be built, not in a single dramatic gesture, but in the quiet, cumulative power of your daily effort. And so we arrive back where we began, not with a fragile self shattered by circumstance, but with an unshakable identity forged in the fires of Stoic wisdom. We started this journey by recognizing how failure can shake our very foundation, and we've explored the ancient tools to rebuild that foundation on something permanent. We learned to separate what is within our control from what is not, anchoring our self-worth not in fleeting outcomes but in our own unwavering character. We discovered that by defining ourselves through virtue, through our courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance, we construct a self that cannot be diminished by any external event. And we practiced the art of cognitive reframing, understanding that our power lies not in what happens to us, but in the story we choose to tell about it, transforming obstacles into the very path forward. This is the profound inner freedom the Stoics promised, a freedom that cannot be taken by any failure, any criticism, or any twist of fate. It is the freedom that Epictetus spoke of when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This isn't a freedom from difficulty, but a freedom within it, the liberty to choose your response, to find your purpose in your principles, and to remain the unshaken author of your own narrative no matter what the world throws your way. Your identity becomes a choice, not a condition. It is a daily practice of aligning your actions with your virtues, of meeting challenges not as threats but as training grounds, and of loving your fate precisely because it is the raw material from which your strength is built. Now, this philosophy truly comes alive not when things are easy, but when they are hard. The next time you face a setback, whether it's a minor frustration or a major loss, I encourage you to see it for what it truly is, an opportunity to practice. This is your invitation to step into the Stoic gymnasium. That difficult conversation is your chance to practice courage. That unexpected change of plans is your moment to practice adaptability. That project that didn't work out is your data for practicing wisdom. Each challenge is a specific, custom-designed exercise to strengthen a particular muscle of your character. Don't wish for an easier life, wish for the greater strength that a fuller life demands. As we close, I want to leave you with a single, simple question to reflect on. Looking back over everything we've discussed, what is the one change you can make, starting today, to strengthen your own foundation? Perhaps it's implementing a 5-minute evening journal to reflect on your actions. Maybe it's pausing the next time you feel frustration rising to ask, is this truly harmful or just inconvenient? It could be as fundamental as deciding to define your success by your effort rather than your results. Choose one thing and commit to it. This is how a resilient identity is built, not in a single grand gesture, but through the patient, consistent layering of small, daily practices. I would love to hear what you choose. Share your commitment, your experiences, or your own Stoic insights in the comments below. Let's learn from each other and build a community focused on real, enduring strength. If you found this journey valuable and want to continue it, consider subscribing for more practical wisdom to help you navigate life's inevitable storms with greater calm, clarity, and courage.